When I lost my hearing at 16, it felt like my world ended. The silence was strange at first, too heavy, too final. People around me tried to act kind, but I could feel the difference in how they treated me. The way their smiles never reached their eyes anymore. The way conversations suddenly stopped when I entered a room. It was like I'd become invisible, even though I was standing right there. My mom, Diane, told everyone she was doing her best to take care of me. She'd tell friends and neighbors that I was doing fine. But I could see in her eyes that she saw me as a burden. My sister, Tessa, was worse. She was 2 years younger than me, always loud, always needing attention. Before the accident, we were close. After it, she started talking about me like I was some project mom had to handle. She'd roll her eyes when she had to drive me to appointments or translate something for me. I learned to read lips fast because I had no choice. People often forget that being deaf doesn't make you stupid. I could still read expressions, sense moods, catch the tension in a room. I could tell when someone's mouth said one thing, but their heart said another. My family never realized how much I could still understand. They assumed silence meant ignorance. I remember one night, sitting in the living room, pretending to scroll through a magazine. My mom and Tessa were in the kitchen. They thought I couldn't see them, that I couldn't hear them. But I watched their faces, read their lips as they talked about me. Tessa said, "She'll never have a normal life. Who'd want to marry her anyway?" Mom just sighed and said, "We'll just have to take care of her forever. I guess this is what life gave us." It felt like someone punched me in the chest. I'd never asked them to take care of me. I was studying, working part-time, trying to be independent. But they already decided who I was and what my limits would be. They didn't even try to understand how much it hurt to hear them say those things. After that, I stopped expecting much from them. I smiled when they looked at me, nodded when they spoke, and pretended not to notice when they whispered things they thought I couldn't hear. Silence became my armor. The more I accepted it, the less power their words had. Still, deep down, I wished just once they'd talk about me with pride or love. I wanted to feel like a daughter and sister again, not a problem they had to fix. But that moment never came. They kept smiling in public, acting like a perfect family, while inside those walls I was just the reminder of a tragedy they couldn't escape. That's when I learned something important. Sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's just where people hide their cruelty. Living in silence became my new normal. I learned to move through the world differently, quietly watching people's faces to understand what they were saying. Lip reading took patience, and I spent hours in front of the mirror, practicing how words looked when spoken. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to survive. Most people stopped trying to communicate properly with me after a while. They'd talk too fast or look away mid-sentence, assuming I wouldn't catch on anyway. I got used to pretending I understood everything, even when I didn't. At home, things were harder. My mom and Tessa talked around me instead of to me. They'd whisper when they thought I wasn't looking. I could still read their lips if I focused, but sometimes I wished I couldn't. It hurt too much to see what they really said. Words like burden and hopeless started showing up on their lips more often than love or family. They'd sigh whenever I asked for help, roll their eyes when I missed something they said. I started to feel like furniture in my own house, something just sitting there, taking up space. Tessa had a way of smiling sweetly when I looked her way, then turning cold the second she thought I couldn't see. I once caught her laughing with a friend, saying, "She doesn't even know when people make fun of her." I did. I just stopped reacting. Pretending not to notice became the easiest way to protect myself. The only person who seemed to care was Ethan. He came into my life a few years after I lost my hearing. We met at a small art event. He said he admired how confident I seemed. He learned some sign language just for me and always looked me in the eyes when he spoke. He made me feel seen again. When my mom or sister made small, cruel remarks, Ethan would defend me. I remember once my mother told him, "You're wasting your life on her." And he said calmly, "I'm exactly where I want to be." That moment stayed with me. I believed he was the only one who truly understood me. Still, even with Ethan around, loneliness clung to me. Every day felt like walking through a world full of voices I could never reach. People laughed, shouted, whispered, all just movements without sound. I smiled often, but most of it was for show. I didn't want pity. I wanted respect, love that didn't come with sighs or whispered complaints. So I kept pretending that I was fine, that I didn't notice, that I wasn't breaking inside. I thought silence made me stronger. But what I didn't know was that behind all those quiet moments, something much darker was being said. And soon, I'd find out the truth I was never meant to hear. After 13 long years of silence, I was finally given hope. My doctor told me I qualified for a cochlear implant surgery. I had waited so long for a chance like this that I almost didn't believe him at first. He warned me that it wouldn't be easy, that recovery would take time, and the sounds might feel strange or overwhelming at first. But I didn't care. I just wanted to hear again, even if it was imperfect. The surgery felt like a blur. When I woke up afterward, everything was quiet as usual. I tried not to get my hopes up too high. A few weeks later, I went in for the activation appointment. The doctor connected the device and adjusted it carefully. Then he said, "You might hear something now." I held my breath. A small beeping sound echoed in my ears, faint but real. It was like the world had suddenly opened a door after keeping me locked out for years. My heart raced. I could hear. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make tears fall down my face. The doctor smiled, saying I'd need to practice and train my brain to understand sounds again. I nodded, but inside I was already making a plan. I decided I wouldn't tell anyone, not my mother, not Tessa, not even Ethan. I wanted to see how they acted when they still thought I couldn't hear. For years, I had lived believing I was powerless, trapped in their world of whispers and fake smiles. Now, I finally had something they didn't know, something that gave me control. When I got home, everything looked the same, but it felt different. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the sound of footsteps, the creak of doors. Things I had forgotten existed were suddenly back. Every sound made me feel alive again. I kept my reactions small so no one would notice. When my mom spoke to me, I pretended to read her lips. When Tessa whispered to herself, I acted as if I didn't notice. Inside, I was listening closely, taking in every detail. The first night back, I lay in bed with tears on my face, listening to the faint sound of rain hitting the window. It was beautiful, not just the sound, but the meaning behind it. After so many years of being trapped in silence, I could finally hear life again. But I didn't tell a soul. It wasn't about revenge yet, it was about truth. I needed to know what kind of people they really were when they thought I was still living in silence. I wanted to see if Ethan's kindness was real, if my mother or sister ever regretted the way they treated me. So I kept quiet, pretending nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew something had. And the next time they whispered behind my back, I'd be listening. A week after the surgery, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, pretending to read a magazine. I still acted the same way I always had, calm, quiet, and unaware. My mother had gone out shopping, and I was alone at home when Tessa arrived. A few minutes later, Ethan came in behind her. I smiled politely, signing a small hello, as if I hadn't heard them greet each other at the door. They thought I couldn't hear a thing. That was their mistake. At first, their voices were casual, light talk about the weather and errands. But soon their words shifted. Tessa lowered her tone and said something that made my heart stop. "I can't believe she still thinks you love her," she laughed softly. "Once the inheritance clears, you'll finally be free." Inheritance? Free. Before I could process it, Ethan's voice followed, cold and casual. "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "I just need to play the loyal boyfriend until then." Who knew being with a deaf girl could actually pay off? I felt my body freeze. My hands began to shake, but I forced myself to stay still. Every sound, every word cut through me like glass. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I kept my eyes on the magazine, pretending I was lost in the pages. My heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. Tessa sat across from Ethan, completely relaxed. "You've done well," she said. "Mom thinks you're doing her a favor, staying with Lauren. Once everything's signed, we'll all be in a better place." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family. My sister. The person I trusted the most, Ethan. All using me like some kind of business deal. My silence, once my weakness, was now the only thing protecting me. They had no idea I could hear every word, every whisper, every lie. Ethan sighed. "She's too trusting. Sometimes I feel bad, but it's almost over." Tessa smirked. "Don't. She'll never even know. She's deaf, remember?" That line broke something inside me. My throat tightened, but I forced my face to stay blank. I turned a page slowly, acting completely unaware. In that moment, I realized how much power there was in pretending. They thought I was helpless, but really, they were showing me exactly who they were. When they finally left, I sat in silence again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence I had lived in before. This time it was filled with truth, with anger, with a storm waiting to break. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the door they'd walked through, my mind already working. They thought they could fool me. They thought my silence made me weak. But they were wrong. My silence was about to become the thing that destroyed them. The days after that night felt heavier than ever. I moved through the house quietly, acting the same as always, polite, calm, and unaware. But inside, everything had changed. I started paying closer attention to every word, every whisper, every glance. Now that I could hear, I caught things I'd never noticed before. My family had built a life around my silence, and I was finally seeing the truth of it. My mother, Diane, spent most mornings on the phone, thinking I couldn't understand. She often spoke to Tessa, her voice full of fake concern. "Lauren doesn't know how to handle things on her own," she said one day. "She's a helpless charity case. We have to make decisions for her." I stood in the hallway, listening quietly. I wanted to believe I had misheard, but she kept talking. "It's not like she'll ever notice if we handle her finances. She signs whatever we put in front of her." That's when it started to make sense. The forms, the papers, the way she always said, "Just sign here, honey." I had trusted her because she was my mother. Now I realized she'd been using that trust to control me. Later that evening, Tessa came over again. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone. They sat in the living room, voices low but clear enough for me to catch every word. "We'll need to sell Dad's old house soon," Tessa said. "It's still under Lauren's name, but Mom can sign for her. We'll say it's part of her medical guardianship." My chest tightened. That house was my father's last gift to me. He'd made sure it was in my name before he passed, saying, "At least you'll always have something of your own." And now they were planning to sell it behind my back. My mother sighed. "We just have to make it look like it's for her benefit. She won't even notice." Tessa laughed. "She never notices anything. She's too busy living in her own little world." I stood there, gripping the counter, my nails digging into my palm to stop myself from reacting. My heart ached, but I stayed quiet. If I confronted them now, they'd twist everything, just like they always did. I needed proof, real proof. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how easily they had fooled me for years. They had used my silence to steal my voice, my money, and my trust. But now things were different. I had something they didn't know, the ability to hear every word they said. I decided then that I wouldn't rush. I would watch them, learn their patterns, and gather everything I needed. They had used my silence for years to control me. Now, I would use it to end their game once and for all. From that moment on, I started planning carefully. I knew I couldn't confront them without proof. Everything had to be done quietly, one step at a time. I bought a small recording device that I could keep hidden in my pocket. It looked like an ordinary keychain, but it could record for hours. I began carrying it everywhere, around the house, in the car, even during visits with Ethan. Each day, I caught new pieces of their real conversations. My mother spoke about how hard it was to care for me while secretly discussing ways to take control of my money. Tessa bragged to her friends about how the family would finally cash in soon. I recorded all of it. Every cruel word, every plan. The more I heard, the more I realized how deep their lies went. Ethan kept showing up, smiling like nothing was wrong. He still held my hand, still told me he loved me, still acted like the perfect boyfriend. But when my mother or Tessa came around, his tone changed. He joined their quiet talks, pretending it was all business. I caught him saying once, "She trusts me completely. She'll sign anything if I guide her." Hearing that made my stomach turn, but I kept my face calm. I wanted him to keep believing I was blind to everything. One afternoon, I decided it was time to get help. I searched through my father's old papers and found the number of his lawyer, Mr. Clark. He had handled my dad's estate years ago, and I remembered him being kind. I called his office and asked to meet him privately. When I finally sat down across from him, he looked surprised to hear me speak clearly. I explained everything, how I'd gotten my hearing back, what I'd overheard, and what they were planning. He listened carefully, then said, "You did the right thing coming to me, Lauren. We'll fix this quietly." Together, we went over every legal document. He discovered that my mother still had outdated guardianship rights that allowed her limited access to my finances. He helped me revoke those immediately and drafted new papers that gave me full control over everything: my accounts, the house, and all assets tied to my father's will. It felt like a huge weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in years, I was in charge of my own life again. But I didn't tell anyone. Not a word. I kept smiling, kept pretending nothing had changed. At home, I still played the same role, the quiet, harmless woman who couldn't hear. But inside, I was collecting evidence and building a wall of protection around myself. My mother thought she was in control. Tessa thought she was smarter. Ethan thought I was still their easy target. They had no idea that every time they spoke, every lie they whispered, I was recording it all, waiting for the perfect moment to make them face the truth. I spent the next few weeks pretending everything was normal while quietly preparing for what I called the dinner. It would be the night they finally saw the real me, not the helpless, deaf woman they thought they could control, but the one who had been listening all along. I invited my mother, Tessa, and Ethan for a small dinner at my house. I told them it was to thank them for their years of support and for always being there for me. My mother's face lit up with pride, and Tessa smirked, clearly thinking I was just being sentimental. Ethan kissed my forehead and told me how sweet I was. Inside, I wanted to laugh. I spent the whole day preparing. I set the table neatly, cooked their favorite meals, and even put on the dress Ethan once said he loved. Everything had to look perfect. When they arrived, the house was warm and quiet. My mother hugged me, saying, "You've come such a long way, sweetheart." I smiled, signing thank you, playing my role one last time. We sat down to eat, and at first, the conversation was polite. They talked about work, vacations, and family friends. I kept quiet, nodding and smiling, letting them feel comfortable. But soon, like always, their real faces started to show. Tessa poured herself another glass of wine and started whispering to Ethan. "She's so clueless," she said with a grin. "If she knew half of what we've done, she'd fall apart." Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, but she's too sweet to ever find out. Besides, she still thinks I'm with her out of love." My mother joined in, shaking her head. "It's for her own good. She wouldn't know how to handle her money anyway. We've only ever tried to help." I sat there, spoon in hand, pretending not to notice. Each word made my pulse stronger, but I didn't move yet. I waited until Tessa leaned closer and said, "Once everything's sold, we'll finally be free of this mess." That was my moment. I placed my spoon down slowly and looked up. The room went quiet for a second. Then I stood, calm but steady. My eyes met Ethan's. "I heard every single word you said," I said clearly. For a second, no one moved. Ethan's face turned pale. My mother froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Tessa blinked, confused, then nervous. The silence that followed was heavy, not the kind I used to live in, but the kind that comes right before everything falls apart. Ethan tried to speak. "Lauren, what are you talking about?" I didn't answer. I just looked at each of them, the people who thought they could lie and steal behind my back, and let them see the truth in my eyes. The woman they'd underestimated for years was finally standing right in front of them, hearing every sound, every lie, every fake word they had ever spoken. For a few seconds, no one said a word. My mother's fork slipped from her hand and hit the plate with a small clink. Ethan stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Tessa's face went from confusion to panic. I reached into my pocket slowly and pulled out my phone. My hands didn't shake this time. I pressed play. The room filled with their own voices. Every whisper, every cruel sentence, every plan to steal what was mine. Tessa's laughter from days ago echoed through the speaker. "She'll never know," she had said in the recording. Then Ethan's voice followed, smooth and heartless. "Once the inheritance clears, I'm done." No one dared to move. My mother's face turned red as the sound of her own words played next. "She's a charity case. We'll handle everything for her." The more it played, the quieter the room became. I watched their expressions change with every passing second, guilt, fear, shame. When the last recording ended, I looked straight at my mother. "You taught me to live in silence," I said calmly. "Now you can live with it." She opened her mouth, trying to find something to say, but no words came out. Tessa stood up, stammering, You don't understand. We were just trying to help." I laughed softly. "Help? You mean by selling my father's house behind my back? Or by using my own money like it was yours?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and desperate. "Lauren, I didn't mean it. It was just talk. You have to believe me." I looked at him, studying the man I had once trusted more than anyone. Then I reached into my pocket again and pulled out the ring he had given me. I placed it on the table gently. "Consider this your final performance," I said. His face fell. He reached out as if to touch my hand, but I pulled it back. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I turned toward my mother and continued. "I already met with Dad's lawyer. Your name is no longer on any of my accounts. You have no legal control over my finances, my home, or my life." I could see the shock in her eyes as she realized what that meant. Everything she had built around my silence was gone. Tessa began to cry, muttering apologies, but I didn't respond. I walked over to the door and opened it. "You can all leave now," I said softly. No one moved for a few moments, but then Ethan stood and walked out, his head down. Tessa followed, wiping her tears. My mother lingered, trying to speak, but I just looked at her and said quietly, "You lost your voice the moment you tried to take mine." Then I closed the door behind them. For the first time, the silence in my home felt peaceful. It wasn't the silence of pain, it was the sound of freedom. In the weeks that followed, Lauren quietly closed every door that once led back to her old life. She blocked their numbers, changed her locks, and told her lawyer to handle any future contact. There were no more arguments, no more begging for understanding. Just silence, the kind she chose this time. Tessa and Diane tried to fight back, of course. They filed papers, claiming Lauren had been manipulated into making legal changes. But the recordings she had collected were more than enough to prove the truth. Her lawyer, Mr. Clark, presented everything. Every cruel word, every greedy plan, every signature they had tried to forge. The judge dismissed their claims immediately. Their case didn't even make it past the first hearing. When the ruling came through, Lauren didn't celebrate. She just sat by her window and breathed. It wasn't victory she felt, it was relief. After years of being underestimated, used, and controlled, she finally owned her life completely. Ethan's downfall came soon after. When the recordings leaked through mutual friends, his reputation collapsed overnight. People who once admired him now saw what he really was, a man who used a woman's silence for his own gain. His job let him go quietly, but the community didn't forget. Whispers followed him everywhere. He tried reaching out once, leaving a long message full of apologies, but Lauren never replied. Some apologies come too late. As for Diane and Tessa, they disappeared from her life completely. The last she heard, they had sold their own home to cover legal fees. But Lauren didn't keep track. She had no reason to. The people who once filled her world with noise no longer had a place in it. She sold her father's old house soon after the case ended. It was a painful decision. It had been her childhood home, full of memories both good and bad, but she needed to start fresh. With the money, she bought a small apartment near the ocean. It was bright, quiet, and peaceful. Every morning, she opened her windows and listened to the waves. The soft rhythm reminded her of everything she had fought for. Not revenge, but freedom. Sometimes, she still wore her hearing aid and listened to music, something she hadn't done in years. Other times, she preferred silence, letting the world move around her without sound. Both felt beautiful in their own way. Lauren learned that peace didn't come from silence or noise. It came from truth. From standing up when everyone thought she couldn't. One evening, as the sun set over the water, she smiled to herself. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was calm. It was hers. Months passed, and life slowly found a rhythm Lauren had never known before. She woke up every morning to the sound of the ocean outside her window, soft, steady, and peaceful. It was the kind of peace that didn't depend on anyone else. She'd spend hours on her balcony, sipping coffee and listening to the waves, amazed at how something so simple could feel so healing. For so long, silence had been something she feared. It reminded her of everything she'd lost: music, laughter, conversation. But now, she understood it differently. Silence was no longer the absence of sound. It was the presence of peace. It was her space to think, to breathe, and to remember who she was before the lies and betrayal. She started writing again, something she hadn't done since high school. Her journal became her safe place, a space to pour out the thoughts she'd kept buried for years. One evening, as the sun sank into the ocean and painted the sky orange, she wrote a line that summed up her entire journey. When people think you can't hear them, you learn who they really are. And when you finally can, you learn who you really are. Reading those words back, Lauren felt something shift inside her. She no longer saw herself as the girl who had been betrayed or pitted. She saw herself as someone who had survived, who had turned her pain into power. Every cruel word she'd overheard had taught her more about the world, and more about herself. She began to meet new people too. Not out of loneliness, but out of curiosity. Neighbors, shopkeepers, people she met during morning walks. She found comfort in small conversations. She didn't tell them everything about her past, just enough to connect. For the first time, she spoke freely, with no fear of being judged or pitted. Her apartment became a reflection of her healing. She decorated it with light colors, plants, and open windows that let the sea breeze in. She even started volunteering at a local center for people with hearing loss, helping others find confidence in themselves. It wasn't about sympathy, it was about strength. She wanted them to see that losing something didn't mean losing everything. Sometimes at night, she would turn off her hearing aid and just sit in the quiet. She'd look out at the moonlit waves and think about how far she'd come. The girl who once lived in silence now chose it when she wanted peace. The woman she became didn't need revenge anymore. She had closure, and that was far more powerful. As the months rolled on, Lauren realized that life didn't always need to be loud to be beautiful. It just needed to be honest. She smiled, closed her journal, and listened to the ocean one more time. The waves whispered softly against the shore, and for the first time, every sound felt like home.